My stepfather thinks it's funny to try to drown me as a joke, and my mother disinherits me for reporting him. But after 3 years, she comes back crying because he tried it with his stepdaughter. I'm a 28-year-old man. I've been debating whether or not to talk about this for a long time, but with everything that's happened recently, I finally feel like I need to get it out. All of this started about 3 years ago, and just when I thought it was behind me, somehow it worked its way back into my life. When I was 19, my mother remarried. Her new husband, Rick, was about 46 at the time. Since I was already in college when they got married, I didn't have to live with them full-time, just visited on holidays and vacations, trying to be as polite as possible for my mother's sake. Rick had a way of joking that always made me uncomfortable. His humor was dark, full of violent and morbid comments that just never sat right with me. My mom always brushed it off, saying it was just his personality, that he didn't mean it seriously. I tried to avoid him, but didn't give it too much thought. After college, I moved back to my hometown and got my own apartment about 20 minutes from where they lived. I had just started an entry-level job and was trying to save as much money as possible, so I visited often for dinner. Rick always offered for me to bring food or help cook, but never missed an opportunity to make comments about me living off of them, dropping hints every time I was there, always acting like I was a burden. My mother told me not to take it seriously, that he was just joking, but the way he said it always felt like he meant it. Everything changed one 4th of July. Rick and my mom were hosting a barbecue, about 15 people came, some of Rick's family, a few of my mom's friends, and a couple neighbors. It was a typical summer gathering, lots of food and drinks. Most people had been drinking for hours. I was taking it easy since I had to drive later. Rick, on the other hand, was drinking heavily and his jokes were getting more and more cruel. As always, I tried to ignore him. Once it got dark and it was time for fireworks, most of us gathered near the pool. I was sitting on the edge with my feet in the water, checking my phone to pass the time. Without warning, Rick came up behind me and shoved me into the pool. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a harmless joke. But for me, it was something completely different. I was fully dressed. My phone was in my hand. And worst of all, Rick knew I couldn't swim. When I was a kid, I nearly drowned. Ever since, I've had a deep fear of water. My mom knew that. Rick knew that. The second I hit the water, I panicked. I started flailing, desperate, completely overwhelmed by fear. My mind blanked. The part of the pool I fell into was about 8 feet deep, I couldn't touch the bottom. I genuinely thought I was going to die. Amid the chaos, I heard laughter. Rick was standing at the edge of the pool, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. He was saying something, but my brain couldn't process the words, I was too busy trying to breathe. Thankfully, someone at the party realized I was actually drowning. I think it was my mom's friend Greta who jumped in first, then someone else helped pull me out. I was coughing up water, trying to catch my breath, and Rick was still laughing. He kept saying I should have seen the look on my face, that I needed to learn to take a joke. My mom stood nearby looking concerned, but didn't say a single word to him. It was like she was torn between comforting me and not upsetting Rick. I told Rick he could have killed me. He shrugged and said something like, "If I really wanted to kill you, you'd be dead." Then he winked at me, turned around, and went to grab another beer. I was shaking, partly from being soaked and cold, but mostly from rage and disbelief. My mom asked me to stay, said Rick had just had too much to drink and didn't mean any harm. I couldn't even look at her. I drove home in wet clothes with a water-ruined phone. The next morning, I went straight to the police station. I didn't even know if what Rick did was technically illegal, but I felt like I had to do something. The officer I spoke to told me that depending on how it was presented, it could be considered assault, or even attempted homicide, since Rick knew I couldn't swim. They took my statement and said they'd investigate. When my mom found out, she called me completely hysterical. She begged me to drop the report, saying it was too much over a misunderstanding, and that stuff like this could destroy a family, that things would never be the same. According to her, Rick was devastated that I'd accuse him of something like that. I refused to back down. Whether or not Rick meant it as a joke, what he did was reckless and dangerous, and I wasn't going to let it slide. 2 days later, Rick was arrested and charged with assault and reckless endangerment. That's when things really started spiraling. My mother lost it, said I had ruined their lives. Rick worked as a contractor for a local government agency, and she was terrified he'd lose his job. She screamed at me over the phone, told me I was dead to her unless I dropped the charges. I told her it didn't work like that anymore, the police and the DA were already involved. From there, everything got worse. Rick made bail, and my mom started turning family and friends against me, telling everyone I was the problem, that it was a simple joke I overreacted to. Some believed her, like my aunt and a couple cousins, but others, especially the ones who were at the party, took my side. The legal process, even with witnesses, was slow. Rick's lawyer tried to spin it all as a misunderstanding. I had to testify at a preliminary hearing, which was one of the most stressful things I've ever done. My mom sat behind Rick the whole time, glaring at me. The judge decided there was enough evidence to go to trial. A month before the trial, Rick's lawyer offered a plea deal. Rick would plead guilty to a misdemeanor reckless endangerment charge. In exchange, he'd serve 30 days in county jail, do 200 hours of community service, and attend anger management classes. The DA asked if I was okay with it. I agreed. I didn't want to go through a full trial if I didn't have to. When Rick took the deal, my mother went completely off the rails. She showed up at my apartment, screaming that the deal wasn't good enough, that she wanted her husband's name cleared, and that meant I had to retract the charges and not accept any deal. I told her it didn't work like that. She told me she never wanted to see me again. And that was that. That was the last time we spoke, until recently. For the past 3 years, I've had no contact with my mother. After everything that happened, she was defending her husband, so I didn't exactly feel bad for her. Honestly, I've been doing well. I got promoted at work, started seriously dating someone who's now my fiancé, and I've been working through all of this in therapy. I won't say I didn't miss her, especially during important moments, but I couldn't understand how she could choose a man who nearly killed me over her own son. No matter how much time passed, the betrayal still hurt. 3 days ago, I got a call from an unknown number. It was my mother. She was crying so hard at first that I thought something terrible had happened, maybe Rick had died or she was seriously ill. But then she started apologizing, frantically and desperately, saying she should have believed me, that she should have protected me, and that she was so sorry. I didn't know what to say. After 3 years of silence, it was overwhelming to hear her voice filled with regret. But I didn't say anything, and she began to explain why she was calling. Apparently, Rick has a 16-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. I knew she existed, but she'd always lived in another state with her mother, so I'd never met her. However, recently, she moved in with Rick and my mom. And last week, Rick pulled the same joke on her that he pulled on me. He pushed her into the pool, knowing she wasn't a strong swimmer. Unlike me, she didn't swallow much water and managed to get to the edge of the pool, but the experience terrified her. As soon as she got out, she called her mother in a panic. Now her mom is threatening to seek full custody and has already filed a police report against Rick. The police started investigating and, in the process, found my case from 3 years ago. They contacted my mother, referencing what had happened to me, and that's when, according to her, she realized this was a pattern in Rick's behavior. Suddenly, it wasn't just a one-time joke, it was a pattern. Now she's begging me to give a statement to support her stepdaughter's case. She says she's left Rick, filed for divorce, and is trying to do the right thing. She keeps saying how sorry she is, that she should have believed me from the beginning, that now she sees who Rick really was, and that she's finally choosing me over him. But here's why I'm posting. On one hand, I want to help this girl. No one should have to go through what I went through. She's a teenager who just wants to live her life, and if my statement can help protect her, it feels like the right thing to do. But at the same time, I'm still hurt and angry. My mother only believes me now because it happened to someone else. For 3 years, she was fine with everyone thinking I overreacted. She was fine cutting me out of her life and standing by Rick. Now that it happened again, suddenly she wants to fix it. It's really hard for me to understand that. I told her I needed time to think and that I'd call her. That was 3 days ago, and I still haven't done it. My fiancé thinks I should give the statement but set firm boundaries with my mom. She tells me, helping the girl doesn't mean I have to let my mother back into my life completely. Some of my friends think I should just tell my mom to figure it out on her own, that I don't owe her or Rick anything after how they treated me. Update 1. I'm thankful for the comments and all the perspectives, ranging from staying out of it completely to helping the stepdaughter because she was a victim of Rick just like I was. But I've made my decision, and here's what happened. After taking a couple of days to really think things through, I decided to call my mother back. It wasn't an easy decision, and I spent a lot of time going back and forth on whether I even wanted to hear her out. But I had to do it, because I had already decided to help, and I needed contact information. The moment she answered, I could hear in her voice that she'd been crying. The conversation was incredibly hard for both of us. She broke down several times, constantly apologizing, saying that she'd been in denial about Rick's behavior for years, and that she had chosen to believe him over me because the alternative, accepting that she'd married someone capable of something like that, was too painful to face. She said she wasn't making excuses, just trying to be honest about why she acted the way she did. I told her that while I appreciated her apology, I wasn't talking to her to forgive her or rebuild our relationship. I explained that rebuilding something so damaged, on the brink of being beyond repair, is really hard. Even more so with just a phone call and a few tears. Because where were those tears and that regret when everything actually happened? She only has them now that the truth has slapped her in the face. She said she understood, which, honestly, I'm not sure she really did, because then she told me she would give me all the time I needed, and that she wasn't expecting immediate forgiveness, just hoping we could start somewhere. Which wasn't what I said, but okay. As for Rick's daughter, I knew I had to help her. I agreed to give a statement to the police, and yesterday I spoke with the detective handling her case. I told him everything that had happened 3 years ago, how Rick pushed me into the pool knowing I couldn't swim, how he laughed while I was struggling to get out, and how he tried to write it off as a joke. They already had my previous statement, but I figured they might need something fresh. The detective asked me some helpful questions. Apparently, Rick is once again trying to pass off what happened in the pool as a misunderstanding. It's like he has a script for getting away with this kind of behavior. I also found out disturbing details about how Rick had been treating his daughter since she moved in. According to the detective, this wasn't the first time he'd done something cruel disguised as a joke. There were other incidents, not as physically dangerous as the pool, but still deeply harmful. He was using fear and humiliation to control her, making her feel small and powerless. The detective said that while none of the other incidents on their own were enough to press charges, together they painted a picture of a man who enjoys making others feel vulnerable. My mom also gave me the phone number of the stepdaughter's mother, and we ended up having a long phone conversation. She was incredibly grateful that I was willing to testify. She told me my statement could make all the difference in ensuring that Rick has very limited access to his daughter. She seemed like a genuinely concerned mother who just wants to protect her daughter from further harm. Hearing the fear and frustration in her voice reminded me so much of how I felt after my own incident. It made me feel even more certain that I was doing the right thing by helping. Also, the difference between a mother who defends her child and one who chooses to defend that piece of garbage named Rick, sorry to anyone named Rick, is night and day. As for my own mother, I've agreed to meet her for coffee tomorrow. She knows more about what's happened with Rick's stepdaughter, and I want to hear it. I don't know how I'll feel seeing her face to face after all this time. My therapist thinks seeing her in person might help me process my emotions and bring some closure to this part of my life. My fiancé offered to come with me for support, and while I really appreciate it, I think this first meeting needs to be just between my mom and me. I'll update again after my meeting with her. No matter what happens, now I know I did the right thing by speaking out, not just for myself, but for that girl who needed someone to believe her. Update 2. Yesterday, I met with my mother. The conversation obviously wasn't easy. She started by telling me she'd been staying with her friend Greta since she left Rick about a week ago. Yes, Greta, the same woman who realized it wasn't just a joke and that I was actually drowning. My mother had already officially filed for divorce and had also requested a temporary restraining order against him. She explained that Rick had shown up drunk and furious at Greta's house one night, making threats. She didn't give me many details, but by the way she spoke, I could tell he had scared her enough to finally act. Then she told me more about what happened with Rick's daughter, Abby. Like I said, I knew she existed but had never met her since she always lived with her mom in another state. About 8 months ago, she moved in with Rick and my mother, and that's when everything started falling apart. According to my mom, Rick had been treating Abby the same way he used to treat me, mocking her, making cruel jokes at her expense, and criticizing everything from her appearance to her interests and even the friends she talked to. My mom admitted she had asked him multiple times to stop, but he always brushed it off, saying he was just joking, that it was a father-daughter thing. Over time, he started doing it behind her back, waiting until he was alone with Abby to say things that made her feel small and powerless. The pool incident was the final straw. They were having a small gathering at the house, just a few people, eating and drinking. Rick had been drinking heavily, which wasn't surprising, and started teasing Abby for being afraid of the water. She could swim, but she wasn't a strong swimmer and felt anxious in deep water. He wouldn't let it go, saying she needed to toughen up. Then, without warning, he pushed her into the deep end of the pool, fully clothed. Abby panicked but managed to get to the edge. She was furious and terrified. As soon as she got out, she called her mother and told her everything that had happened. That should have been the end of it. But Rick, in his usual cruel way, decided she needed to be punished for overreacting and calling her mother to accuse him. He took her phone, telling her she had to learn respect. It was my mother who finally returned her phone and helped her pack a bag so she could leave. Abby stayed that night with a friend until her mom could travel to come get her. That's when her mom filed the report and began fighting for full custody. It felt like traveling 3 years back in time, in more ways than one. Because while the details were slightly different, it was almost exactly what happened to me. The only difference this time was that my mother saw it with her own eyes. I asked her why she finally decided to leave Rick after all the years she spent defending him. She hesitated, and for the first time in a long while, I saw genuine remorse in her expression. She told me that seeing what Rick did to Abby was like watching a replay of what happened to me. But this time, she couldn't lie to herself. She couldn't make excuses or pretend it was just a misunderstanding. She had been in denial for years, convincing herself that Rick was just joking and never meant harm. But watching him treat a vulnerable teenage girl the same way shattered that illusion. She admitted that Rick hadn't just been cruel to me, he'd also been cruel to her. He had been controlling, manipulative, and emotionally abusive, slowly isolating her from friends and family until she felt like she had no one but him. I told her I was glad she was finally leaving Rick, even if it was a little late. But I also told her I wasn't there to go back to the way things used to be. Before we parted ways, she asked me for one more thing. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to meet Abby. Right now, Abby was staying at Greta's house with her while her mother handled some work matters that were delaying her from taking her home. My mom thought maybe it would help Abby to talk to someone who had gone through a similar experience, someone who could understand what she was going through. That night, I had a session with my therapist and talked about everything. He listened closely and then suggested that meeting Abby could actually be good for both of us. He pointed out that sometimes, helping others who've been through similar trauma can be a healing experience. It might give me a sense of closure, knowing that what happened to me could help someone else. And for Abby, knowing someone else had survived what she's living through could make her feel less alone. I still don't know what I'm going to do. I told my mother I'd think about it overnight and give her an answer tomorrow. I'll update again soon. The past few days have been incredibly exhausting. Update 3. The last few days have been extremely exhausting. I feel like everything that happened years ago is resurfacing, and it's been difficult to manage the emotions. But I promised I would update, so here it goes. The day after my coffee meeting with my mom, I agreed to meet Abby. We met at Greta's house, where my mom is staying. I was nervous, more nervous than I expected. Not because of Abby herself, but because I didn't know what to say or how she'd react. Abby is 16, shy, and reserved. But when I walked in, she stood up and gave me a small smile. That alone told me a lot. We talked in the living room for a while, just about regular things. She asked about my job, my fiancé, what video games I liked. I let her lead the conversation. Eventually, she brought it up. She said, "Rick pushed me into the pool. My mom thinks he was trying to scare me, but I think he liked watching me panic." I told her I believed her. That what happened to her had also happened to me, almost exactly. Her eyes welled up, and she said she was so glad someone else knew what it felt like. We talked for over an hour. She told me about other things Rick had done, comments, cruel jokes, little humiliations. He liked to make her feel stupid. He liked control. I shared what I went through too, how I felt crazy for years wondering if I'd overreacted. How people sided with him. She nodded like she understood completely. I think she did. When we were done, she hugged me. I didn't expect that, but I think we both needed it. Later that night, I talked to my therapist again. She said she was proud of me. That facing my trauma and using it to help someone else was a powerful step forward. I think she's right. I don't know what's going to happen with Rick legally. But I do know this: I did the right thing by speaking up, both back then and now. I helped someone who needed to be heard, and I feel lighter because of it. I'm still not sure what kind of relationship I'll have with my mom, but at least for now, I'm open to talking. I still need boundaries. There's a lot of pain to work through. But meeting Abby helped me find a part of myself again, the part that isn't just angry or hurt, but strong. The part that can be there for someone else. So yeah. That's where I'm at. I don't know if there'll be another update. Maybe this is the end of the story. Or maybe just the beginning of something new. Update 4. But after living through everything, now feel like it was all necessary. I decided to meet Abby. I wasn't entirely sure what to expect, but I knew I couldn't ignore the situation. My fiancé came with me for support, and we met at Greta's house, where my mom and Abby had been staying since my mom left Rick. Abby is a quiet and thoughtful teenager, and she reminded me a lot of myself when I was younger. At first, she was pretty reserved, which made sense. She'd been through a lot in a short time, and now she was meeting someone who had also been hurt by the same man. But when we started talking about music, something clicked. It turns out we both play guitar, and that small connection seemed to help her relax a little. I didn't want to pressure her into talking about Rick, but she was the one who brought it up. She asked me what had happened to me exactly, and I told her a simpler version of the story, one that focused more on how I felt than all the painful details. She listened closely, nodding as I spoke, and then admitted that Rick had made her feel uncomfortable from the moment she moved in. The pool incident wasn't an isolated thing, it was just the worst example of how he treated her. What hit me hardest was how much she blamed herself. She kept saying she should have spoken up sooner, that maybe if she'd told her mom earlier how Rick was treating her, none of this would have happened. It was heartbreaking to hear, because I knew exactly how she felt. I told her none of this was her fault, that Rick was the adult, and he was solely responsible for his actions, not her. I could see she wanted to believe me, but I also know from experience that letting go of self-blame isn't something that happens overnight. While Abby and I talked in the living room, my mom and my fiancé were in the kitchen. At one point, Greta pulled me aside and told me something that caught me off guard. Apparently, my mom had been contacting a support group for domestic abuse survivors, looking for help. She'd also discovered financial documents showing that Rick had been hiding money from her for years. That explained why she'd felt so trapped. She really believed she couldn't afford to leave him. After a couple of hours, Abby's mom arrived to pick her up. She's taking her back to their home state and is moving forward with the custody battle. Her goal is to get full custody with no visitation rights for Rick. She thanked me for speaking to the police and for spending time with Abby. Apparently, Abby had been shutting down, refusing to talk much about what happened, but after meeting me, she opened up more and seemed to be processing things better. That alone made me feel like I'd made the right decision in meeting her. As for Rick, things are finally catching up to him. Since he already had a conviction from my case, this second incident, so similar to what happened to me, has triggered more severe legal consequences. The detective called me yesterday with an update. Rick is now being charged with endangering a minor, assault, and violating probation. He's currently in jail awaiting a bail hearing. This time, it doesn't look like he'll be able to talk his way out of it with the usual misunderstanding excuse. Before I left Greta's house, my mom asked if we could start family therapy. I told her I wasn't there for her and that going to therapy wouldn't magically fix everything. I'm still hurt. I still don't fully trust her. I can't stop thinking about how she didn't believe me when everything happened, something that should have been natural for a mother who saw and knew what was going on. If she had believed me from the start, maybe Abby wouldn't have had to go through this. I don't know if I'll ever be able to completely forgive my mother. She had chances to do the right thing back then, and she chose to believe Rick instead of me. That's not something I can just forget. Maybe she was a victim too, but I've known mothers who, even while being abused by their husbands, still drew the line when it came to their kids. My fiancée, who had spoken with my mom during my meeting with Abby, said she'll support whatever decision I make about her. Abby and I exchanged numbers before she left, and I told her she could text me anytime if she needed someone who understood. I hope she does. I don't know when I'll update again, it'll depend on whether something major happens. But for now, I just want to thank everyone who gave me advice and support. Update 4, Final Closure. I just wanted to give everyone closure, because based on the comments and private messages I've received, I know what matters most to many of you is whether Rick finally got the punishment he deserved. I know that years ago, he pretty much got off easy for what he did. This felt like a second chance for him to face real consequences. I don't know if this is truly justice. I don't know how much punishment would ever feel like enough. I don't have a perfect answer. But here's what he got. The judge sentenced him to nearly 4 years in prison for doing something similar again, this time in a minimum security facility. And that's what we get. The other night, we were talking with Abby about all of this, and she said she's happy with the outcome. Her mother had already secured full custody, and Rick didn't even have visitation rights, not even supervised ones. But now, with him going to prison for 4 years, maybe less with good behavior, he'll still be out while she's technically a minor. But as far as she's concerned, she never wants to see her father again. Sounds like a good plan to me. Now, the next most common question I've been asked is whether I finally reconciled with my mother. And the answer is, basically, no. I've already shared bits and pieces of how I feel about her, but I'll summarize it here. Yes, I understand my mother was a victim too. But she could have done so much more for me back then. I could have understood if she continued defending him, and still kept me in her life. Not that I would have liked it, but at least then I would have felt like she still wanted me in her life. But cutting me out completely? It made it feel like she preferred to have only Rick, and that I was secondary, tertiary, or completely worthless to her. I believe the only reason she wants me around now is because she has no other close family left. Maybe she feels lonely. Maybe she wants to share her pain with someone. But I'm not some emotional tool you pull out of the garage when you're desperate. I'm not a toy you throw away when bored and expect to find intact when you remember it later. So no, I don't have a relationship with my mother, and I've avoided speaking to her this entire time. Some people will understand. Others won't. But that's the decision I've made.